So actually, before I get into the questions, John, would you just like to briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what you do? Yeah, however you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sophie. That's very kind of you to invite me to do that. Well, my name's John Hartley. I'm originally from the United Kingdom, as my wife, and we've lived here in New Zealand for 26 years. It's home, and it's a place where we feel we are in the right place at the right time. My background is commercial. Today I chair Kiwi Bank, one of the 5 major banks in the country, and I chair Kaingaroa Forest, which is the largest plantation forestry company in the country. But in addition to that, I've done a number of years of voluntary work in the international field with World Vision, and locally as well with our local city mission. And to round off the story, I'm also ordained in the Anglican Church as a priest.
Wow, it's such an honor to be alongside someone with such diverse experience and a lot of it. And so thank you for being willing to share that and answering some of these questions and seeing how that flows through into your answers. I'm really excited. So how do you think international cooperation through APEC can help chart the path to a better future?
Well, I think, first of all, there's sort of a couple of words inside the word APEC, which are really important to reflect on. One is cooperation means understanding the other and working together. And it's really not hard to look at the global news and think that cooperation is not on the up. There are significant amounts of stress, distress around the world. The second is that I'm really convinced the word economic is too narrow when we start to think about the well-being of the people of this world and the planet itself. And so if we put those two together, if we think about economics as being a subset of our health as a world and our health as a people, then we start to think about the way we do things differently. And by that, I mean, for example, climate change is not limited to a town. It's not limited to a region or a country. These are global issues which do not respect the sovereignty with which we approach them. And I hope that through cooperation and consensus and good leadership, we could see those challenges being picked up in the true frame that they're in, which is global, not local or regional.
Oh, what a beautiful answer, weaving together lots of different things in there, and very fitting too, because the theme of this year's kind of overall APEC, not just Voices of the Future, is join, work, grow together. And so that collaborative, that kind of whole notion of collaboration is so key. And you did kind of mention this, I think, briefly, but I'm keen to kind of unpack more what this better future for the region looks like through your eyes. Obviously, you touched on some of the challenges you think we're facing and that those transcend any boundaries of economies or, boundaries of countries. But what's your vision for that better future for the region?
Well, I think picking up on the first 2 words you've got, which is join and work. Join really to me is about truly cooperating. And we can explore that a little bit further, but work, I think, is another interesting thing, another interesting word, because we tend to think about it in 9-to-5 terms, or what do I do? When you meet somebody, you say, what do you do? But I think I'd like to think that work is both mahi, which is work, but tahi, which is together. So if we think about mahi tahi as being the way we talk about work, then that means how do we work together, not just in my job, not just in my economic outlet or my service provision or my health provision, but how do we work collectively towards providing a better world and a better future for all? And so, a couple of things that strike me about that when we think about a better future is, do we actually have a mutual covenant of well-being? is that something that's really important to us, or is it lip service, or doesn't it exist? What are the priorities that we put onto how we spend our time? The second thing that I'm sort of thinking about a better future is I'd love to find ways that the younger voices are heard and felt, that the young feel that they can speak fearlessly no matter the environment that they are in, and that those voices are respected for their view. They may be wrong, but they're respected for the view. And so we can hold power to account through a multitude of mechanisms, not simply laws and regulations. I'm also struck by a better future requiring us to move outside our silos of expertise, you know, our single thing that we are good at. Because it's human to put things into boxes, because it's so much easier to deal with things in boxes. But ecosystems aren't like that. Ecosystems are interdependent and codependent. And the more we destroy our natural environment, the more we realize how interdependent and codependent we are. So I suppose the invitation is to learn to live with the gray and try and avoid the black and the white. Finally, I think that the better future really can come back to the indigenous knowledge and the indigenous wisdom of kaitiaki, which is fruitful stewardship. How do we look after what we have been given? And how do we then think about what we are passing on to the next generation? And I'm the one who has inherited and done what I have done. Sometimes I think our generation shouldn't be too proud about what we're passing on, but you're the generation that are now receiving it. And I hope that somehow we can find a way that you can do things beyond an electoral cycle, because electoral cycles are really, in some ways, poisonous to the development of long-term solutions. But on the other side of it, I also think that we're at a pivot point that GDP is not the thing to be worshipped. It's something we need to wean ourselves off and think about the more broader aspects of how we work within the planetary boundaries that we have.
I totally and completely agree with everything you've just said. I don't think anyone I've ever heard has put it better than that, so succinctly. And the point that you make too about how, you know, for us as humans, putting things into silos can be easier for us to understand and compute. But in the future, understanding the impact that putting things in silos will be so hard to kind of, to wrestle with and to understand and to reason with. And that whole thing about mahi tahi, working together, and the purpose of that and the why behind that and what we can achieve through doing that is amazing. And working together while bringing that Indigenous knowledge into that picture and working alongside our Indigenous communities and amplifying that knowledge. And I love too how you base that answer off of what values we need to carry through into a better future, and into a future for all, because obviously those values can be applied to all sorts of contexts right now. And so the beautiful thing about that too is that can help to unify us. It's not like a concrete kind of thing. It's like these values will shape us and we'll be shaped. We should let these values shape us and let these values shape how we develop and transform our economies to be in the midst of these challenges and opportunities. So I just loved your answer so much to that question, and I'm gonna listen to that back 100%. I am keen now to move into, and you mentioned this too briefly about kind of the voices of youth and you know, the fact that, you know, young people have a huge stake in this because we will inherit the decisions being made now in the future that they create. And so I'm interested to hear about what you think the priority might be for young people in, you know, the APEC region or New Zealand specifically. Like, what are you hearing and seeing from young people?
I think it's a wise question, but I think it also it always needs to be put into a personal context. you and I are sitting here with the luxury of the internet, being able to do what we're being able to do. But at the same time, we know that inequality is expanding in most places. And so as a consequence, I think general answers are just that, they're general. And each person has to try and decide how they engage and activate. So to me, some of the things that young people should be considering is activism around non-sovereign issues like climate change, like biodiversity loss, like the true cost of economic growth. We never ever price economic growth properly. We rarely look at the consequences on land, people, biodiversity, longer term consequences. And the more that I try and read and understand this, the more that I understand that what we thought was a good idea back whenever we did it doesn't necessarily work out a good idea for reasons that we never understood, such as re-engineering irrigation systems, for example. And I'm only picking on that as an example. But I think there are other things that we should be inviting young people to engage on, and a couple of those that come to mind, and I don't have answers here, are and I'm afraid to say it, the embedded corruption in certain economies and behaviors of that corruption, armed conflict, gender treatment. I think we could all find topics to choose. And so my thought would be encouraging people to focus on the passion that they have for an issue and not try to boil the ocean. Let others have their passion for other issues, but let's work together to be alive and alert to what others are doing, support them, both inside the region, but also outside the region. And I'm really encouraged, for example, by what I read around climate change litigation by young people in Europe, which is now getting the attention of the United Nations. Who would have thought that 7 young people in Portugal could have done something like this? I'd also encourage young people to be wildly inquisitive, to connect dots and to build on the best of each other. Where they can, to vote. Don't be abstinent in your voting, but equally also think about representation like you've done, Sophie. And I know it's not an easy road. It's not an easy choice. But unfortunately, that's part of the price of trying to be active and changing things. It's just one way of doing it. It's not the only way. But I think at the end of the day, I just invite all your young people to think about being true to themselves, about working together with passion for what your generation's well-being should look like. Not mine, your generation's.
Oh, yeah, and the point that you made too, that to just highlight is that, it sometimes can feel like we have to kind of wear this on our shoulders, and like the weight of making all of these changes and being passionate about all of the issues that you mentioned, which are, in their own right are, can be scary and can be huge to kind of think about and try to understand how we can tackle. But the fact that we can just focus on our passion and focus on, how we best feel we can use our skills for good in the region and in our own countries and our own economies is such sound advice, and really, really great advice for us heading into these drafting sessions where we will be collaborating with each other to, put stuff onto paper and to actually then kind of demand that is heard and demand that is used to shape the conversation and not just as an add-on at the end that says, here are some youth perspectives.
Well, so, my one advice in drafting is be bold, because you cannot put it in afterwards.
True. Oh, it's such good advice. Yeah. So this kind of perfectly leads on to our final question today, John. And this question is how do you think we can meaningfully incorporate the voices of youth into decision making, considering the importance of creating a future for all? How do you think we can do that, and how do you think we should do that?
I'm going to start in a place which you might not expect me to start, which is I think language really matters. And I think the narrative that we speak really matters. And I'd really encourage the rediscovery of old words, words like beauty, contentment, empathy, compassion, truth, sacredness. You know, if we, for example, if we see our world as sacred, then we will treat it very differently than if we see it as an extractive resource. And so, you know, question, should young people be thinking about languages or the use of language that is different to the everyday social media language, which is so easy to get into? I mean, the second thing that I'm struck with is around when you might want to explore this separately, around Maori health, where we talk about physical, social, family, and spiritual health as being the four pillars. And again, I have found that a really useful lens to look at so many things through, because if you don't have the four corners to your house, your whare, it falls down. So can you apply that to some of your challenges that you are thinking about? I'd like to think that your voices going forward will be both formal and informal. And I think I challenge you to think about speaking on behalf of those who don't have a voice. And that is, I think, what we're called to do when we have a voice. And I'm sure that's not something that's new to you, but by being inclusive and not judgmental, you can hold power accountable. It's really hard if you are biased one way or the other. And I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. But I would really also encourage genuine listening, because genuine listening is the start of being able to act in the best interests of all, no matter where the idea emanates from. I'm probably going to leave it there, Sophie, because I think we could go wandering off in all sorts of different places, but I really look forward to seeing the outcome of your efforts.
Oh, thank you so much, John. That was a beautiful conversation. Just to revert back to those words, and you know, it's how we, and you so embodied this too, it's how we look back to move forward through that Indigenous knowledge, those old words, you know, how we can live and have the potential to live and be, and yeah, to treat the planet and to name the planet and to understand what the planet does for us and what it needs from us. And so, I just thank you so much. And honestly, that whole time I was very genuinely listening. And I agree with every single point that you've made. And yeah, I think that so many people will be able to find hope and advice and wisdom in what you've shared. So I really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you for sharing all of what you have with us.